Breaking news in the murder trial of Karen Reed. The judge declaring a mistrial after the jury was once again unable to reach a unanimous verdict during their third round of deliberations. The Massachusetts woman was accused of ramming her Boston police officer boyfriend with her SUV and leaving him to die. Here's what her attorney said while exiting court just a few moments ago.
Folks, this is what it looks like when you bring false charges against an innocent person. The Commonwealth did their worst. They brought the weight of the state based on spurious charges, based on compromised investigation and investigators, and compromised witnesses. This is what it looks like. And guess what? They failed. They failed miserably, and they'll continue to fail.
Let's bring in ABC News' Ariel Reshef, who's been covering this story for World News Tonight, for Good Morning America. She joins us on the phone. Also joining us again is legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Ariel, bring us up to speed here on how we got here in this high-profile case of Karen Reed.
Hey, good afternoon, Elizabeth. Well, this was an incredibly convoluted, months-long case with mountains of evidence and dozens of witnesses. It has really divided the entire community outside of Boston and made waves across the country. It's also sparked what we've seen as to be an online obsession from many people on TikTok and the like. In the end, the jury was also split by this and irreparably deadlocked, as you mentioned. They sent a third and final note today to the judge saying that they were at an impasse, saying the deep division is not due to the lack of consideration, but to severe adherence to our personal beliefs and moral compasses. To continue to deliberate would be futile. So a very strong statement there, and the judge acquiescing and saying, in fact, this is a mistrial. Karen Reed was accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend with her Lexus on a snowy night in 2022, and prosecutors really tried to paint this as an intentional act that she backed into John O'Keefe on purpose, and that the two had a fraught relationship. They presented evidence to suggest that Reed's taillight was broken when she hit O'Keefe and that his hair was found on the back of the car. Their case really hinged on that evidence, which, of course, the defense put under the microscope, Elizabeth.
Well, and Brian, give us some of the legal arguments that were presented in this case from the defense and the prosecution and why we got to this point today where there was a mistrial.
So for the prosecution, they were making the point that Karen Reed had intentionally backed up into John O'Keefe, her boyfriend, and that there was this tumultuous relationship, a lot of alcohol on the night that this occurred, and that the injuries and damage to the vehicle were consistent with the rest of the evidence. But for the defense, this was such a sloppy investigation, and there also had this air of a conspiracy. And so the two themes, in my mind, played off of each other, because every time there was a misstep by local authorities in the investigation, you could also blame it on a potential conspiracy or a cover-up, just because so many steps were overlooked. But also, I think the defense had a really good job in their reconstructionist expert, as well as their forensic analysis of the vehicle, as well as John O'Keefe's body. And I think that was the argument that really won out for this hung jury. And then now the question just becomes, what's next as terms of what the prosecutor is going to do?
Well, right. And Ariel, we've seen a lot of support for Karen Reed. People watching outside of the courtroom. She has a big following. Talk to us a little bit more about this conspiracy theory that her attorneys presented in this killing. Yeah,
so as was mentioned, the defense really argued that Reed was the victim of a police cover-up, corrupt police, after O'Keefe died inside of a party with other officers present. And they alleged that he was dumped outside and essentially left for dead in the snow, and that corrupt investigators actually planted the evidence that we saw in this case later at the scene. And Reed has maintained her innocence throughout all of this. Her attorneys have now vowed to fight any attempt to retry this case. But look, at the center of all of this, you mentioned her supporters. There was also John O'Keefe's family. They were in court every single day. They've lost their loved one, who they say was the consummate family man. So you can imagine there will be pressure on the prosecutors to continue to pursue this case and see it retried. Elizabeth.
So then, Brian, the question is, what happens next? What kind of timeline are we looking at for a trial again here?
I would say, depending on how the prosecution wants to go forward in this case, and I say it in that sense because I do agree that I think they are going to go forward. If one, not just for the victim and his family, but also two, to kind of just save face. Like the hung jury, in some regards, believed that there potentially was a cover-up here and that the prosecutor should not have brought this case. So I think they want to prove them wrong. And so next steps, I would say, in the next weeks to a couple of months, we will see another trial. I think in the next, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks, we'll probably hear a decision as to whether or not not, the prosecution wants to go forward, if not sooner. And then from there, it's about planning a retrial. And I don't think there's much to really plan here because we've already done the trial once. It's just a matter of getting their ducks in a row and deciding if they want to go more intentional, as they did before, or maybe they go with the idea that the death of John O'Keefe was more reckless or negligent, and they might win on a lesser charge. But that's up to the prosecutor to decide.
So really have to question their strategy going forward. Brian Buckmeyer, Ariel Reshef, appreciate both of your analysis on this breaking story.